Our Bible reading this evening is taken from Mark's Gospel, chapter 10, and we'll be reading verses 1 to 12. Jesus then left that place and went into the region of Judea and across the Jordan. Again, crowds of people came to him, and as was his custom, he taught them. Some Pharisees came and tested him by asking, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" "What did Moses command you?" he replied. They said, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." "It was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote you this law," Jesus replied. "But at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." When they were in the house again, the disciples asked Jesus about this. He answered, "Anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery." This is the word of the Lord.
Thank you very much, Rachel, for reading that for us. Darren's prayed, so we can spend our time looking at the passage together. And as we do so, I'm conscious that we enter into sensitive territory with that reading, with this reflection on what Jesus is saying here. For some, it'll be sensitive territory because of a past experience in relation to divorce. Perhaps your own, perhaps your parents. In some cases, that may be unfolding at the present time, and so very deeply, immediately personal and sensitive. For others, I guess, a passage like this is going to be hard because singleness for you is hard. And anything that addresses the topic of marriage feels uncomfortable and hard going. And given all of that, you might say, well, why do we go here? Well, I suppose one answer would be because Jesus does and because it's here in Scripture, and that's what we try and do here at Christ Church, work our way through the pages of the Bible and arrive at whatever it is. But another way of answering it would be because in the Bible, marriage is a really big deal. There's a sense in which the Bible begins with a wedding, and it ends with a wedding. It's as if weddings bookmark the entire sweep of Scripture. It's there in Genesis chapter 2. Jesus refers to it here, and it precipitates a song of joy from Adam. And it's there again at the very end of the Bible, in the final chapters of Revelation, where the wedding is between Jesus and his bride, the church. And again, a source of joy and celebration and singing. Marriage is a big deal. And yet, of course, on the other hand, marriage is in all sorts of ways coming under all sorts of dispute, all sorts of pressure upon it. Maybe you've seen some of these statistics. The rate of marriage has halved in the past 30 years. The proportion of people who get married has dramatically increased. In the middle of the last century, almost every 20-year-old could expect to marry at some point in their lives. By 2014, that had dropped to just 50% of 20-year-olds would marry. Divorce rates, they also climb. Currently, 42% of marriages end in divorce, with 1 in 5 marriages lasting less than 10 years. Dramatic statistics of the decline in the stability and indeed the value given to marriage. Now, at first sight, this passage that we come to today would seem to be about divorce. That's the question that Jesus gets asked right there at the top of the passage in verse 2. Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife? But maybe you noticed, as Rachel read, that the conversation does not go as you might expect. And I'd love to just notice that with you as we work our way through. We're going to do that under three headings. We're going to look at the problem that they bring to Jesus, and in a sense the problem that we also might have and bring. Then the ambition that Jesus sets, spend most time there, before wrapping up with the heartache that many know. And I guess in doing this, I'm conscious that for those of us who are married, Jesus' teaching will remind us what it is that we have entered into. Perhaps reset our perspective of things that we knew once and have slowly forgotten. For those who will one day be married, I hope that Jesus' teaching here will set a perspective for you, set a direction of thought about what it is that you might move towards. And for those who will never marry, I trust that Jesus' teaching will cast a perspective on what it is that final wedding, the wedding of Jesus and the church, is all about, and why that is the precious treasure that we can look forward to. So, okay, first, the problem they bring. You'll see that as Jesus is teaching the crowd, some Pharisees come, and we are told that they test him with this question about divorce, and that's significant. See, Jesus is probably in the area where John the Baptist was previously ministering, and that's the territory that is ruled over by King Herod. And King Herod didn't have a great track record with people who talked very clearly and very directly about divorce. John the Baptist was the last guy to give it a go, and he and his head got separated as a result. So it may well be that the Pharisees are trying to sort of lure Jesus in, get him to say something equally sort of strident about divorce, in order that they hope that Herod might deal with Jesus the same way. That could be. Or it may be that they are just trying to draw him into their own disputes, to try and draw him into the debates that went on within the rabbinic schools about divorce, to try and sort of force him into an awkward position. Because Deuteronomy 24, chapter 24, is the passage that they are kind of referring to here. When Jesus says to them, "What did Moses command you?" And they quote, "Moses permitted a man to write a certificate of divorce and send her away." The reference is to Deuteronomy 24. And two rabbinic schools had completely different ideas about what this certificate of divorce was all about. Deuteronomy 24 says that if a man found something indecent, if his wife displeased him because he found something indecent about her, he could write a certificate of divorce and send her away. And one rabbinic school said, well, look, there's something indecent would need to be something pretty serious, probably sexual unfaithfulness. But then another rabbinic school said, no, anything much would do. I mean, if she burns a meal, or if he finds her unattractive anymore, that'll do. Send her away on that basis. Not hard to imagine, is it, the terrible abuses that must have existed in a male-dominated culture that had those kind of views. The dispute then was about the proper basis for divorce. And it seems as though they want to draw Jesus in, see if they can get him to name what he will allow and won't allow, what the implications are for somebody who has a certificate of divorce or doesn't. They want to know the exceptions, they want to know the rules. And it could be that tonight we want something similar. You know, our curiosity this evening is, well, when can you and when mustn't you? Who can and who can't? And what happens when this? And what are the implications after that? But do you see that Jesus doesn't take their bait? He simply tells them, verse 5, it was because your hearts were hard that Moses wrote this law. That chapter, Deuteronomy 24, it's actually really quite fine print. If you go back and look at it, we won't for sake of time. But it actually explains how to manage things in the very unusual situation of a woman finding that she's been divorced one time and then marries somebody else and is divorced by that second man, and then the first man is interested in marrying her again. And the rule in Deuteronomy 24 is about what happens in that sort of funny situation. In that sense, Deuteronomy 24 doesn't set out a system for divorces. No, it simply gives guidance about how to control a system that already existed. And the only reason that that system of divorces was in place, Jesus says, is because of the hardness of your hearts. And he says, but let me show you a better way. And rather than entering into their debate and engaging with their discussions, Jesus sets out a positive view of what everything that marriage was intended to be. And it seems to me that tonight we should do the same. So, second, the ambition that Jesus sets. You'll see that Jesus takes them straight back to the creation narrative. He takes them straight back to the first chapters of Genesis. Because he says that if you want to know about marriage, well, here's where you've got to go. You need to understand God's plan for it. How he set it up, what he intended as a result of it. Because marriage is his idea. And at the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Incredibly strong, isn't it? What God says about marriage in Genesis chapter 2, and what Jesus reinforces here. That when two people marry, God's gaze upon them changes. He no longer sees them as two individuals. He now sees them as one new person, one flesh. As thoroughly joined as if they were a single body now, a single flesh. With the implication that to separate that marriage bond is about as dramatic as an amputation. Like cutting off a part of your own body. It's really strong. And in a short time, I need to be brief, picking out some of the key things that this implies about our understanding of marriage. So let me do so as quickly and as succinctly as I can. 4 things. First, it means that marriage is primary. According to the Bible, the primary relationship is not parent to child, it's not sibling to sibling, it's not friend to friend. No, the primary relation on which he is going to build society is the marriage bond. Husband to wife. And every culture knows this. Never been a culture discovered that doesn't have a marriage bond of some sort woven into its cultural understanding of the way that it organizes itself. So first, it's primary. Second, it's covenantal. That's a posh way of saying it's built on promise. Therefore, marriage isn't a present in the moment kind of statement that people make to one another. It is a future commitment. Sometimes when I'm meeting with a couple in advance of their marriage, and we're planning the wedding day and so on, they ask me if it would be okay for them to write their own vows. The answer, if you're interested, is no. It's not okay. And it's not okay for two reasons. First, it's not okay because it's not legal, and they wouldn't end up being married, so that's a pretty important reason. But secondly, it's not allowed because the vows that they write are generally awful. See, because the vows that they write are all about the now, the present. I love you. I need you. I want with all my heart to be with you. We know that. That's why they're coming to a wedding day. That's not interesting at all, not really. No, the vows that they need to make are vows about the future. See, no one doubts on their wedding day that they want to be together. What we need to know is whether they commit to staying together. So at every marriage I have ever taken, I get to ask the same question. I get to ask him if he will take her to be his wife. Would you love her, comfort her, honor and protect her, and forsaking all others, be faithful to her as long as you both shall live? And I ask her the same question. Now, interestingly, the question and the response is spoken to me. At this stage, they're not speaking to one another. They're speaking to me, who is marrying them, because I am representing, as it were, all of you. Because this is a public declaration of what they are committing themselves to. And the answer that I need to hear is, I will. It is not, as Hollywood would often present it to us, I do. Because no one doubts that they do. They do commit themselves to one another on that day. Of course he does. You know, she looks utterly stunning, and they're in romance factor 50. So of course they do. What we're interested in is, will they? Will they stay committed? One writer has this to say. What is most destructive, it's going to pop up on the screen, what is most destructive to marriage is the self-fulfillment ethic that assumes marriage and the family are primarily institutions of personal fulfillment. And that if we look closely enough, we will find the right person. He goes on, we never know whom we marry. We just think we do. Or even if we first marry the right person, just give it a while and he or she will change. For marriage, being the enormous thing it is, means we're not the same person after we've entered it. The primary problem is learning how to love and care for the stranger to whom you find yourself married. Is that a startling quote? Do you see what this means? It means, in a sense, that we might say that it's not love that sustains marriage. It's marriage that sustains love. Third, we've seen that marriage is primary. We've seen that marriage is covenantal. Third, marriage is sexual. We've seen that marriage is unique in its covenantal, lifelong commitment till death us do part. And that is why God also makes it the unique and exclusive context for sex. Now, I appreciate just how countercultural that is. And I appreciate that just this very week, senior leaders in the Church of England have expressed the way in which they have lost their nerve on this truth and no longer represent what is clearly said by Jesus here and in other places in Scripture about the only appropriate context for sexual activity. So to hold to this, if you're a Christian believer and you want to follow Jesus and you're committed to him, is going to set you at odds with our culture. And you need to know that. We need to be ready to anticipate that this is at odds. So we need to be able to understand, well, why would Jesus say this? Well, here at least I think are some of the reasons. Because in sex, we make ourselves fully available to another person. We open ourselves. We reveal ourselves. We are naked with another person. We join ourselves to another person physically as fully as it is possible to do. And that physical joining and that physical nakedness is intended to be matched by an emotional joining and an emotional nakedness. With my body I honor you. All that I am I give to you, and all that I have I share with you. That's what gets promised at a wedding service. And that's what we most fundamentally desire. To fully know and be fully known in that completely transparent, fully giving ourselves to another person kind of way. And marriage provides the safe context in which that can happen, because it involves that lifelong commitment to one another. It involves that prior promise that I'm with you for keeps. And that means that we're with someone in marriage who won't reject me when I reveal my failings, who won't laugh at me when I speak about my fears. And that's why I dare to open myself and to share myself with another, because of that underlying covenantal promise. Now, of course, a friendship could allow similar things, and we'll think about that next week. But there is something additionally unique about this God-given context, ordained by him, a creation mandate in which sexual expression flows out of that mutual commitment one to another. So it's primary, it's covenantal, it's sexual, and finally it's powerful. By which I mean that marriage has the potential both for tremendous good, but also the potential for tremendous harm. Because if, as I've been saying, if in marriage we let somebody inside, we trust them with things that we haven't trusted to anybody else, at least we do that if marriage is functioning as it should, then we give to our spouse both the capacity to bless us more wonderfully than any person has ever blessed us. But we also grant to them the capacity to hurt us more painfully than we have ever been hurt. Let me try and catch what I mean by that. See, suppose I met you last week at this service, and we had a nice chat. But suppose tonight you come up to me and you say, I've been thinking about our conversation last week, and I want to say that I don't want to see you again. I don't want you to ever be in touch with me again. And you walk off. And I say, what was it? And I say, I'm not telling you. Just leave me alone. Well, I mean, you can imagine that's a pretty upsetting moment. And I would feel bothered by that, puzzled and troubled by that. Probably I'd still be troubled about it in a month's time. Now suppose that you came up and had that conversation with me, and we've been friends for 5 years. And you tell me that you don't want to talk to me anymore, and you don't want to be in touch with me, and I'm never to get in touch with you again, and you walk away. Now, I'll still be thinking about that in a year's time. What did I do? Where did that come from? Now suppose I go home this evening, and my wife Beth, we've been married for 37 years, she says to me, I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. You're not to talk to me. I don't want you to be in touch with me. It's finished. I will never get over that loss. See, the depth of the relationship is proportional to the depth of the hurt that we feel in the loss of that relationship. Marriage is powerful. It has the most glorious capacity to bless, but also the most terrible potential for harm. Which brings me to a final heading: the heartache we know. You'll see that this little episode ends with Jesus speaking with his disciples in private. They're in the house again, verse 10. And they're asking him about what they've heard. And he says, anyone who divorces his wife and marries another woman commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another man, she commits adultery. There's lots of fascinating things about that. The even-handedness of it. I've mentioned the very sort of male-dominated version of the regulations that existed in Jesus' day. He places it completely parallel. But again, it's absolute. It's really strong, what he's saying here. And such is the strength of this teaching that in Matthew's version of this episode, the disciples hear these words and they say, if that's the case, it's better not to get married. And then we go there. Sort of first century version of commitment phobics. And in that sense, that they understand something then. They understand that the unraveling of the marriage bond brings terrible heartache. And because our hearts are still hard, these things will still happen. I've chosen tonight not to grapple with the rights and wrongs of divorce, the whys and the why nots, or the what nexts. I wanted to follow what I see here as Jesus' lead, which is rather than spend time talking about divorce, he wants to spend time talking about marriage and all that it's intended to be. But as we close, it's good to remember that neither the hurt of a broken marriage nor the hurt of a past divorce are beyond the grace of God. I said earlier that the hurt that we feel, the pain that we would experience in a broken relationship is proportional to the depth of that relationship. Brief friendship hurts less than a longer friendship, hurts less than the breach of a marriage bond. But now think, as we come in a moment to the Lord's Supper to share bread and wine together, consider this. Consider the scale of the hurt that must therefore be involved when the disruption is of a relationship that has existed for all eternity. When it's a commitment of mutual love that began before the beginning of time. Because that is what we're about to remember, isn't it? In tokens of bread and wine, we remember one who was forsaken. Not in a broken marriage, but in the agony of a cross when he bore our sin and knew what it was to therefore be forsaken by his own Father. And Jesus did that so that in all of our losses, in every one of our pains, in our griefs and our failures, including the failure of marriage, we need never doubt that we could somehow be beyond the reach of his love. And that instead of that, our ambition would be to seek to love as he has loved us. Our ambition would be that in all of our friendships, in our marriages, and above all in our present love of Jesus himself, we would be experiencing a foretaste of that ultimate marriage between Christ and the church. That all of our present relationships would, in a sense, be patterned on the riches of his relationship with us into eternity, so that we would experience a foretaste of all of that, growing bit by bit, till the day that we are his bride.